Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. The air in Genoa City crackled with tension. Inside Enterprise's top-floor conference room, the walls seemed to sweat with the weight of secrets. Victor sat at the head of the table, his icy gaze fixed on Kane, who was desperately trying to appear composed. Kane had always thought himself clever, cunning even, but standing face to face with Victor, he realized just how far out of his depth he truly was. "I suggest you stop playing games with me, Kane," Victor said coldly, fingers steepled, voice even and deadly. "I'm not the man to bluff." Kane shifted in his seat, trying to maintain his bravado. "I'm not bluffing," he said, though his voice cracked ever so slightly. Victor leaned forward. "Then you're dumber than I thought." Outside the building, Grace walked briskly, her heels clicking against the pavement like a metronome of determination. She had a plan, and Charles was in her crosshairs. What lacked in experience, she made up for in resolve and secrets. Secrets she didn't dare share with Holden, at least not yet, hated lying, but when it came to justice or revenge, depending on who you asked, she was willing to bend the truth. Back at Ranch, Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, eyes trained on the fireplace, but her thoughts were on her brother Nick. Something was off. His moods were unpredictable, and she sensed a storm brewing inside him. A sister always knew. Nick had been more distracted than usual lately, dodging questions, showing up late, brooding in silence. Victoria intended to get to the bottom of it. Meanwhile, Summers stood in her hotel suite, a smug smile playing at the corners of her lips. She was up to something again. This time, her target was none other than her supposed business partner. Kane had been stringing him along just long enough to get what she wanted. And now she was ready to pull the rug out from under him. She made a call. "Billy," she purred, "it's time." Across town, Billy grinned as he hung up the phone. "Let the games begin," he whispered to himself, already imagining Kane's face when the double cross landed. Elsewhere, Sharon sat on the edge of the bed, staring at a photograph of guilt gnawed at her like a parasite. She couldn't help but blame herself for her daughter's recent spiral. If only she'd paid closer attention, if only she'd done more. The what-if swirled in her mind, toxic and relentless. February 10 arrived with a jolt. Was in motion, her plan, risky, dangerous, born of desperation, was unfolding, but the walls were closing in. She felt it, and she wasn't wrong. Victor, never one to rest easy when pieces moved without his consent, had called an emergency family meeting. The gathered, eyes wide with questions, while Victor stood like a general ready for war. "It's time we talk," he announced, "because I'm done being lied to." But across Genoa City, another war was brewing, and Billy had begun setting their trap for Kane. Documents were being forged, emails faked, all with one end in mind: removing Kane from power. Sharon, meanwhile, spiraled deeper into self-blame, second-guessing every decision she'd made regarding. She barely heard reassurances. Her mind was somewhere else, on the little girl she'd raised and how she'd lost her way. By the next morning, Genoa City police had tracked to on the outskirts of town, and Devon, desperate to reunite with their son, clung to hope as the officers prepared to move in. Every second felt like a lifetime. Still disoriented but determined, was beginning to unravel. Her original plan to flee with, to keep him safe from a world she didn't trust, was crumbling. Her hands trembled as she packed a small bag, looking over her shoulder at every sound. It was time to run again, she could feel it. But she didn't make it far. Sirens blared, lights flashed, officers stormed in, and holding clothes let out a choked sob. "Don't take him," she pleaded, "please." Rushed forward, tears streaming down her face as she reached for her son. Confused and scared, reached back. Devon caught them both in his arms, and the family reunion was soaked in heartbreak and relief. Tessa Porter stood at the precinct, watching it all unfold through the glass. Her heart shattered. She had known was spiraling but hadn't realized how bad it had become. Now she had a decision to make: stay and fight or walk away. Elsewhere, Victor received a new report, this one about Kane's real activities. A ledger, a hidden account, and something else, something dark. He stormed out of the office, emotions boiling beneath his skin. When Victor arrived at Kane's office, he didn't knock, he didn't wait. He kicked the door open and found Kane slumped at his desk, motionless. "Kane," Victor barked. No response. He stepped closer, uncertain whether Kane was unconscious, dead, or just pretending. "Get up," Victor growled, still nothing. Back at Jabot was tearing into Jack with a fury no one saw coming. She had learned something Jack had hidden, and now she was unleashing all the anger she'd kept bottled for years. "I trusted you," she spat, "and you made a fool of me." At Enterprises, Victoria cornered Billy in his office. "What are you doing with?" she demanded. Billy smirked, refusing to answer, but Victoria wasn't letting him off the hook that easily. If you bring more trouble to this family, I'll destroy you, she warned. Wasn't faring much better, she returned to her suite to find her laptop wiped, her files gone. A message blinked on the screen: "You're not the only player in this game." At the ranch, poured herself a drink, her hands shook. Her nerves were frayed, she couldn't take another one of Victor's plans. She needed peace and she found herself dialing Jack's number. When he answered, she didn't speak, she didn't need to. Friday, February 13, Valentine's Day in Genoa City, love and lies danced hand in hand. Billy showed up at Sally's doorstep, roses in one hand, a smirk on his lips. "You didn't think I'd forget, did you?" he asked. Sally rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. At the same time, Adam was orchestrating his own romantic production for Chelsea: candles, wine, jazz. It was the old Adam the charmer, and Chelsea couldn't help but be drawn in. Across town, Noah was on a mission. He had rented out an entire rooftop restaurant for Sienna. Flowers adorned every table, fairy lights twinkled. "For you," he said, extending a hand. Sienna gasped. Back in lockup, sat behind bars, hollow-eyed. Tessa stood on the other side, fingers trembling as they gripped the cold steel. "I love you," she whispered, closed her eyes. "Then don't wait for me," she replied. The day after Valentine's Day hung heavy over Genoa City, its glimmering remnants of love already overshadowed by scandal, betrayal, and a town reeling from too many secrets. The morning paper hit doorsteps with a thud front page. "In custody, shocking kidnapping ends with arrest." Inside crimson lights, whispers floated between coffee cups and sideways glances. Back at the GCPD, Sharon hovered near cell, her face a complicated canvas of sorrow and maternal anguish. "I should seen the signs," Sharon whispered, gripping the cold metal bars. "I should helped sooner." His eyes, red-rimmed and distant, softened only for a moment. "Don't blame yourself," she said, her voice low. "I lost myself. I thought I could protect him. I thought I could fix everything." "You're not broken," Sharon said fiercely, "and you're not alone." Tessa stood quietly nearby, her hand pressed against the glass divider of the visitor booth. She hadn't left his side for more than a few hours since the arrest. She had a meeting with a label that day, an opportunity she'd been chasing for months, but instead she sat in that station, a silent promise that love doesn't flinch. Meanwhile, Victor returned to his office after confirming Kane was, in fact, alive, just drunk and passed out. "Coward," Victor muttered as he left Kane's office. The ledgers he'd uncovered were damning enough: illegal transfers, offshore accounts, shell corporations. Kane had been playing with fire, and now Victor was ready to burn the entire board. Victor called Michael Baldwin. "I want everything airtight," Victor said. "This ends now." Michael understood the unspoken command. Kane's empire was about to crumble, and Victor wanted it done with zero blood on his family's hands. Back at his suite, she paced furiously, her jaw tight. The file wipe wasn't random, it was a message. And only one person knew where she'd stored that blackmail folder: Billy, she called him. "You wiped my system," she snapped. Billy, sitting smugly in society, stirred his drink. "Just keeping things fair," he replied. "I made you a partner," she hissed. "You made me a pawn," he corrected. "Now the game's changed." Hung up seething, the partnership was officially dead and Billy had drawn first blood, but wasn't the kind of woman who stayed down for long. Elsewhere, Victoria confronted her father at the ranch. "You're making moves behind my back again," she accused. Victor didn't flinch. "I'm cleaning up your mess," he said. "Billy, Kane, they're not to be trusted." "You don't trust anyone," Victoria replied bitterly. "I trust loyalty," he said. "Then you should trust me," she shot back, voice cracking, "because I'm all you've got left who hasn't stabbed you in the back." Victor studied her in silence for a long moment. Then he simply turned away, leaving her with her own echo. At Chancellor Winters, Devon and tried to get back to business, but the scars of the last week hadn't healed. Was quiet too quiet? Trauma lingered in the eyes of a child far too young to carry the weight of kidnapping and confusion. "We need to get him help," said, holding back tears. "A child therapist, someone who can help him feel safe again." Devon nodded. "And what about us?" "What about us?" she replied, her voice fragile. "Are we okay?" Didn't answer. Meanwhile, continued her covert mission. She met Holden for coffee, flashing a sweet smile. "You said you wanted to know more about," she said, casually dropping a file on the table. Holden opened it and froze. "What is this?" he asked. "Everything you need to know," replied. "Why are you doing this?" His expression turned to ice. "Because she hurt someone I care about." Holden looked up at her. "And what about us?" There is no us if you side with her, said, rising from the table. Ajabo tried to mend fences with Jack, but trust was shattered. I lashed out, she admitted, but I had every right. Jack sighed, you always do, that's the problem. You think betrayal is a currency you can just spend and earn back later. I want us back, she said quietly. Jack looked at her with eyes that had seen too many betrayals. We don't exist anymore, he said and walked away. Over at Society, Billy ordered another drink, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Sally Spectra, who had just walked in wearing confidence like perfume. Buy you a drink? He asked. Sally smirked, only if you're not trying to take over my company. Depends, Billy said, raising an eyebrow. Are you trying to take over mine? They both laughed, but the flirtation was loaded dangerous. It was the kind of banter that could lead to a business partnership or another broken heart. Later that evening, Chelsea and Adam shared a quiet moment on the tower balcony. This is nice, Chelsea said, like old times. Adam didn't respond right away. He looked out at the skyline. We were good once, he finally said. We could be again, she said, a whisper of hope in her voice. But Adam's eyes darkened. I'm not that man anymore. Chelsea didn't argue, she knew, but still she stayed. On the rooftop across town, Sienna looked out at the skyline, tears in her eyes. Noah stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You okay? He asked. She turned to face him. I've never been more terrified or more in love. Noah smiled. That's how you know it's real. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, informed Sharon that arraignment would be in the morning. They're pushing for charges, he said gently. Sharon's breath hitched. What about bail? Maybe, said, but it won't be easy. That night, Tessa returned to the station with her guitar. Sitting outside the holding cell, she began to play softly, curled up on the cot, opened her eyes. Their eyes met through the bars, no words, just music and memory. The next morning, returned from an overnight trip. She stepped into the ranch, only to find Victor staring at a file, his eyes stormy. Is it done? She asked. He nodded. Then let it go, she said. Let us live again. Victor didn't reply, but the silence said everything. At the courthouse stood before the judge, Sharon and Tessa behind her, and Devin across the aisle holding. The verdict was pending. But in Genoa City, nothing ever stays buried. And every ending is only the start of another storm.